Sunday night's the concert,
Jason, Sydney.
and after the concert, we're gonna have some, we're gonna fellowship with them because they need fellowship, because, they have a young child that has cancer. So we're
How's he
gonna,
doing, do we know?
I don't know, we'll find out.
Yeah.
We'll see.
How old is that little boy? Is he?
I wanted, I wanted to say 5, I think I'm wrong. But, afford yourself that opportunity, come out and support them. And,
Yes, dear. I'll be
the
right
the
home.
breakfast is on the 14th of March. Next elders meeting is on the 16th. If you haven't visited the library lately, you should avail yourself of that opportunity.
And instructions are on the wall over the table.
Yes.
I mean, instructions are over the wall under the table.
We like the first one, that's you, no, I'm just kidding.
Thank you, Arlene.
Instructions are like, is that like?
Where are the instructions out there?
Under the wall, under the table. I mean, over the table.
That's what I thought. Okay, the instructions are underneath the table. Actually, they're glued to the bottom of the table. You have to climb and look up and read them.
Oh, you think I have such an easy time?
The Seder list sign-up is in the foyer, and now the Resurrection Sunday brunch listing is in the foyer. If you're in doubt what to bring, just bring bacon. Everything's good with bacon.
I know, I ate ice cream with bacon today, pretty good.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Did you hide the bacon?
I saw bacon soda the other day.
You know, Little Caesars has a new bacon wrapped pizza. All around the outside it's wrapped in bacon. Yeah. No faking, I like bacon.
March?
I do. We're going to have a garage sale to support missions. If you would like to get rid of anything at your house, just bring it on by and try to sell it to help our missions program. No, bring it to the church. And then remember VBS in July. And any other announcements?
What month was the men's breakfast in?
It's in March.
In March, not April.
It's the 14th of March.
How's Larry doing?
Larry's surgery yesterday, I waited a long time to hear from Dee, but that wasn't because of Larry, it was because of the person in front of Larry. It took longer than they thought. So, as far as, he may be home now, I'm not sure.
She said he had to spend one night.
Yes, that was the idea, and that would have been last night itself. As far as I know, he's doing well. And they've got him set at 80 beats a minute, so he's moving kind of fast right now. You got to watch him because he'd just fly right by. And then for a week, and then they're going to throttle him back a little bit to 70 beats a minute. And that's where they're going to, if everything's going well, he'll be good right there. We'll see him again pretty soon. Amen. Sue's, it's a brain scan, right? An EEG at EEG, not an egg, at EEG, is tomorrow at 7:30 in the morning. So, if you're up at 7:30, say a prayer for Sue in that process. What else?
All of this stuff got to,
Yes, Ron had a close encounter of the Alex type, didn't he?
you did?
Yes, he did. He met with Alex.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I was going to say, what does that mean?
Well, when you run into Alex, you know it.
Yes, he says, wow, he's on fire for the Lord. I said, yeah, where have you been? I said, weren't you with VBS?
Oh, yeah.
Did you tell people what's going on, because we don't know?
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on down there. They got a school bus now, so they're driving around the neighborhood picking up all the kids. They have built they have a small house on their property so that there's somebody there all the time. So guy that drove us when we were down there, he used to drive cocaine back and forth across the border. He's a pretty good driver. And he had one time they were getting ready to arrest him, and he feels that the Holy Spirit interceded on his behalf. So that was his last delivery, and now he has a prison ministry. Everybody that has anything to do with these people, they're all on fire for the Lord. They are just, they're crazy. They're crazy for Jesus. They're really, really cool guys. So,
Connie's cousin from Las Cruces went with him, and he was just,
I imagine.
it was very good for him too.
Amen. Amen. So Ron took a big old, I imagine that filled up his pickup pretty much.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
He had to tarp it.
And so keep those people in your prayers because they're really on a cutting edge ministry down there. But they say that there's still lives being changed. That since the Christmas function, the Lord has really blessed them in all sorts of different ways. So praise the Lord, He can use us. So what other prayer requests do you have tonight?
Just remember Amanda Wake, again, the girl that has the mass in her breast, and then I've got another friend in Safford that has a really bad heart.
Okay.
Young girl.
Remember Eddie? For Eddie? For his welfare, for his stability. Others?
Marty, how are you?
Well, the doctor pretty much agreed with my neurologist. I'm basically a very highly stressed person when it comes out in physical ways. I've known this for many years, but I was still glad to go through the CAT scan and MRI to make sure I didn't have anything worse for stroke conditions. So physically I'm clear, but I still have to master the technique of stressing myself, which I have not done. I don't know how to do it. If anybody's got any suggestions besides a blow on the head, I'm open to suggestions.
Well, darn. A blow on the head, huh? Okay.
That's what I did last time in my meeting.
What else?
We need prayer for our business,
Okay.
just employees,
All right.
things like that.
Remember Tom and Ashley's business. What else?
Unsafe loved ones.
Unsaved loved ones. What else? Yeah, our nation, man. Yeah, pray for Israel. What else?
You can take that off.
Pray for Donna. She misses her husband. Mr. Bill. What else? Anybody else? Okay, let's expand into prayer. Brother Tom, you can our opening prayer, please.
Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening, Father, just ready to hear your word. Father, we lift up these prayer requests to you that we've mentioned. Father, we just pray for your will in all those areas. Just pray that we're here tonight, Father, to glorify you. So grateful for the opportunity to be able to freely worship you. We thank you for our church, our pastor. We just lift him up. We lift this church body up and all the decisions that we have to make. And just pray that we'll do so only after we counsel with you and just allow your Spirit to guide us and direct us. We thank you for all that you do in the name of your Son. Amen.
Amen. then next week, I'm gonna start teaching Ecclesiastes. And then, I'm gonna teach Ecclesiastes. And after that, I'm gonna teach, one or two of the minor prophets. I'm not sure, if you have a druther on which minor prophet I might teach, you can let me know, and then I'll probably teach that one, okay? But, because it's, well, I love to teach history, not everybody loves history, so I want to try to take a break, and then I'll resume this historical perspective of the Old Testament. But the reign of David is reflected in 1 Samuel 16 through 27, 2 Samuel 1 through 23, and then 1 Chronicles, it would be 11 through 29, I believe. And David rose to power. As David rose to power, the local power in the area would have been Philistia. And there really wasn't, during this time, one of the great benefits David had was that there wasn't really any world powers. You know, a lot of people were a lot weaker. So as Saul leaves the scene, Saul's son, who was under the leadership of Abner, Ishbosheth, is made king by him, and he begins a government in exile, which really never really gains any momentum, so to say. Remember David, as he fought with Saul, had made an alliance with the Philistines. And he actually was made a king over, and they had given him a certain possession. I think it was at Hebron. 2 Samuel 2 speaks of it. And so David had developed a kind of a liaison with those folks, and that helped him begin his reign as king. He was kind of under their protection for a while, and his main rival, Saul's son, his career only lasted a couple of years. He was unable actually to wage war against anyone, as David developed himself by diplomacy. Ishbosheth kind of faded off into the background. He was actually murdered by a couple of his military officers. So David becomes king. 2 Samuel 5. David becomes king then over all of Israel. All right. And 1 Chronicles 11 would speak to the same thing. And he begins to then secure and consolidate his kingdom. The Philistines recognized David as a threat, so they then began to plan war against him. And the first time they attacked David, he defeated him. He wiped him out. He beat him badly. 2 Samuel 5 would speak to that. And they came back a couple of times to try to defeat him, but eventually they became tributaries to David, which simply means they paid David for protection. He dominated them. Another person that he interacted with was the king of Tyre, Hiram I. They had a military and political treaty between the two countries, and they did a lot of trading. The king of Tyre would be in Phoenicia, is where we would call that, and they had good wood in what we would consider to be present-day Lebanon, and They had good cypress trees, et cetera, things that Israel needed. And Israel, some of their craftsmen, they worked with them to make crafts for them. Now, one of the most significant things that David did, one of the wisest choices he made was he picked out a capital city, okay? Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was the city of Salem at that time. I did a paper on David in college. And that's why the name of the city, when I think of that, I think of that paper. And it was a Canaanite city. It was a stronghold for the Canaanites. And David went in and took it over in 2 Samuel 5:6. It speaks about it. And it was a good location. It was centrally located, and it was very easy to defend. It was up on a high plateau. They call it a mountain or a hill or whatever, but it's not. It's not really. It's not like these mountains out here. You know, it's still a significant position, but it was one of his best things that he did was to take Salem and then make it his city. And he captured the city really with his, he had a small band of soldiers, and they were able, most people think that they came in through a water system, where they would, that was always one of the weaknesses in any city. Cities had to have water. So a lot of times these guys would come in through the water system. It was a 40-foot vertical shaft that they had to swim on. So I think they had to swim like 35 feet this way and then 40 feet up. So they had to hold their breath for quite a while. But they did a good job of it, and they were able to take this city. And at the time, the city of Salem, which became Jerusalem, was about 6 acres in total. Not very much. A small city. And there's not a lot of evidence of that city today because Jerusalem is still there. And there's layers upon layers of cities there. So, one of the first things David did when they took over Jerusalem is they brought the Ark of the Covenant there. And so it became not only their political capital, but also their religious capital. He appointed some priests, and what did David want to do there? What was one of his ideas, something he wanted to do that God wouldn't let him do? Yeah, he wanted to build a temple, and God said no. But David then, now he has a hub which to work from, so he begins to consolidate his kingdom. And the Canaanite city-states along the coastal plains, those that he hasn't already conquered, he takes them over. And he begins really to build an empire. He goes to war. First he goes to war with the Ammonites, and they captured the capital of the Ammonites, Rabbah, R-A-B-B-A-H, and then the Arameans were an ally of the Ammonites, and David defeated them, and he became ruler over their nation. And what he did was he put one of his hand-picked people in there to run their nation. He went down and defeated Moab. He defeated Edom. Not a lot of details about that. 1 Kings 11. We know one thing though, when he defeated them, he really defeated them. He wiped them out. He killed everybody. Women, children, everybody. He had a bone to pick with them, and he really went after them. Then he went up, so he secured his southern flank. Then he went up to secure his northern flank, and he went up to Syria. 2 Samuel 8 speaks to that. And so he was able to take Damascus, and he used Damascus as the administrative seat where he put a deputy in charge there. And he was able to take quite a bit of wealth from that part of the world when he conquered them. Israel, David took over Israel, and then he started to expand. He went to this time, Israel is probably as strong as anybody in the world by this time. As they begin to defeat these countries around them, they are as strong as anybody. They have quite a sizable piece of land, and they begin then to develop administratively. Their government begins to develop in a certain way, and David begins to implement differences of. He starts to appoint cabinet officers, and at least part of his design seems to be copied after the Egyptian system as far as the government. He divided Israel into districts so that he could tax them by district. And the districts didn't run by tribal, the old tribe. He divided the districts so that the tribes wouldn't be together, so he could break their unity, okay? He began a much greater military organization, and with everything controlled out of Jerusalem, directly under his authority. He introduced forced labor into Israelite society. Everybody was obligated to work for the government when they were called to do so. Okay? And he developed for the first time because remember we talked about Saul. Saul didn't have a palace. Saul didn't have anything. For the first time in this people's race, the king had a court. And in the court, there were a lot of ladies, a lot of children, a lot of, how nowadays, what do you call those guys that hang out with the rich athletes?
Rappers.
Huh? Rappers. Their entourage is what you call them. Rappers. Thank you, Tom. This isn't going out over the air.
Delete.
And he had a guard of honor, so he has a rather large inner entourage, and all of this is made possible because there's nobody really in his way to stop him. God has cleared the path for him so that he can dominate. Babylonia hasn't been very strong for a while. The Hurrians aren't strong. Assyria is too weak for now. They end up rebounding, and they end up coming back later. But and now something interesting begins to happen in the nation Israel. And that interesting thing is the emergence of the prophets. Okay? God starts, there's a direct correlation during this time as the prophets begin to emerge. And like I've said before, a lot of the prophets were contemporaries. They knew each other, they knew of each other. And you have here now, you have prophets. One of the reasons why you probably had God begin to use prophets is because the chief priest is attached to David. He's attached to the king. And he kind of works at the king's beck and call. So the prophets come forward and begin to speak to the nation Israel about their condition. Not a lot at first, but after a while, quite loudly and quite often. Now, as David grew older, one of the biggest problems he had was, who's going to replace me? Okay? David was a very charismatic figure. You figure somebody killed Goliath and all the things he did, he could fight a lion barehanded and all that kind of stuff, all these legends. And there were some that felt that, there was a very small faction, but there were some that felt that David was never a legitimate king anyways, that he should have been the descendant of Saul that was on the throne. So there began, as David became older, there began all this infighting, political intrigue over who would follow David as king, okay? So we have a rebellion. Who's the first rival that steps up to replace David? Pardon? Yeah, Absalom is the first one. And he steps forward. But the problem is that the army never really attaches itself to him. He actually tries to lead a revolt against David so that he can take power even before David has left. And that doesn't work because David still has the loyalty of the army. So there begins, during this time, different parts of the country. Some of the provinces in the north have an idea. There's considered to be, some of the northern provinces think that David favors the southern provinces where Jerusalem is, that he favors them over the northern provinces. So there's the rebellion of Sheba, Sheba. 2 Samuel 20 speaks about that. And then, so in all this intrigue, David, who has become elderly by now, has made no provision up to this point for a successor. His oldest son then begins to make plans to take over the throne. And he is actually acclaimed to be the king. But Solomon, who does follow David, has a key supporter. Do you know who his key supporter is?
God. God, obviously.
God, yeah. Well, it's a prophet, Nathan. Nathan and Zadok, Z-A-D-O-K, who's the high priest, and then David has a group of guys that really, they're like mercenaries that would go fight anybody, and the leader of those mercenaries all fall in behind Solomon, and because of all those alliances, David sees Solomon then as the most effective, the one that could most effectively follow him, and so he becomes David's successor, really because of what we might call political intrigue. So, what do we know about David as a person? What did he like to do?
Shepherd.
Okay, he was a shepherd. I don't know if he liked it. Huh? Yeah, he liked to fight.
Music.
He was a musician. He liked to write poetry, which he then put to music. I think 72, probably over 70 of the Psalms are attributed. 150 Psalms, I think almost half of them are attributed to David. He was a very passionate person. If he loved you, he really loved you, and if he hated you, you were in trouble, because he would do his best to get you. So, his friendship, his love for people, like his friendship with Jonathan, his love for Bathsheba, which got him in a lot of trouble. He sowed a lot of, he reaped a lot of what he sowed, and got himself in trouble. But as you go into, when you get into 1 Kings, you see the rise of Solomon. And I wanted to get to him tonight so I can talk about Ecclesiastes next week. The first Kings 1 through 11, 2 Chronicles 1 through 9 speak to Solomon. And one thing about Solomon as a statesman, he was an outstanding statesman. Yeah, Corey?
Yeah, I have a question about David. It's always puzzled me. I know I'm supposed to accept this, but he was a man after God's own heart, even after all the horrible things that he did.
Yeah.
That's always been a puzzle for me.
Well, I don't know how to answer that beyond the fact that
It's there.
I consider, I don't know, what were you gonna say, Larry?
The fact that he was always quick to repent.
Yeah.
When he did wrong, he recognized it and manned up.
I think David was just like you and me, Gordy. You know, hopefully when we mess up, we're ready to go repent and get on with serving the Lord, you know. So, yeah, I know, that's kind of a, when you look at that picture, it's hard for us to reconcile it in our minds. But I think God just, you know, God understands who, you know, the other night Eddie was saying that he didn't believe that all, I don't know what he said. He said, yeah, he wondered, his point was that there was nothing that said that those 8 people were saved, and he attributed some of their actions after the flood to say that they weren't saved. Well, if that was the case, look at Noah after the flood. Come on. You know, Noah was a rascal sometime. He was out there drinking that Thunderbird. What's the word, Thunderbird? That's what we used to drink in my neighborhood, Thunderbird. 69 cents a bottle. So, you know, that there's no correlation between, God knows exactly who we are. So he, you know, God, one thing God knows is that none of us have achieved, none of us have really achieved sainthood. We're saints, but we haven't achieved sainthood.
Yeah, when you get to that point, then he makes his own.
Yeah, we get crowned when we get to heaven. So, but Solomon was, he was a real good statesman, but he wasn't. Some of his actions were what really caused the kingdom to be divided. He wasn't really a real good warrior. He had good ideas about how to defend the country, but he made some mistakes which caused some of the issues that led to the kingdom being divided. He, after David died, he made sure, one thing that he knew how to do, he went around and killed everybody that might be in opposition to him. He was pretty smart about that, okay? 1 Kings 2 speaks to that idea. And in his foreign policy, he needed to hold on to what his father had. And he was pretty successful at doing that. Not everything that his father had when he came into power, he still had when he left power. But he kept some of the alliances that his father had. And in the area of national defense, he studied military sciences, and he began to become an arms dealer. Wasn't so much a fighter. He was a shrewd businessman. That's how they were able to do the things they were able to do in regards to building. He developed a chariot industry in Israel. They became expert horsemen. They exported horses. Some of the ruins they have found and where they had like, what's that temple of Herod's outside of Jerusalem with a flat top on top. What's the name of that place? Mexico. I know you know what I mean. It's in the end times. It's right at the plain of Armageddon is where it's at. Yeah, whatever you call that place. There were some stables, enormous stables there for horses that were from Solomon's time. He did a lot of importing and exporting with other countries. Israel developed a very large copper industry from the south, just like Benson, you know, just like southern Arizona, and that helped his wealth. He became very good at sea trade. He developed a fleet, and they started trading a lot with Africa, which they had never done before. And because of his ideal location at the crossroads between Africa and Asia, he set up these trade centers, kind of like Love's down there, big Trade Center where everybody would convene, they'd have a big garage sale. So all of these things he did to promote trade, and all of these things helped increase the wealth of his country. And he was very, very prosperous. Israel prospered under Solomon more than it ever had, and more than it ever did. Okay, many new cities began. A lot of cities grew. It's estimated that from the time of Saul to the time of Solomon, that the population doubled. Not a pretty significant growth. They were one of the first civilizations to use iron-tipped plows, which changed their ability to grow crops. And Solomon built a nice temple, a really nice temple. You know, the eastern wall that protected the city was covered in gold, so when the sun came up over the hills in the morning, it reflected the sun. He had a very large armory and very, very large treasury, a very large judicial hall. It's called the Judgment Hall. He had a palace for Pharaoh's daughter. He married one of the Pharaoh's daughters. He married everybody. So he,
Horses and women.
horses and women, yeah. You know, watch those two. And he, under him, writing culture advanced. There was a lot of writing advancement in the area of writing. A lot of great literature from this time. Music flourished during this time. They were a civilization, kind of like we were about 60 or 70 years ago. They were in their zenith, and but the problem is when you spend a lot of money, and then your income starts to fall away, and you start spending more than you make. Sound familiar? Start spending a lot more than you make. It causes you problems. And that's really what began Solomon's downfall, is his cost outran his income, because he did live a pretty exorbitant lifestyle, you know. And he began a system. He divided the country into 12 districts, and each district was supposed to support the government for a month. Now, for some of the districts, that wasn't too hard. In the south, there were a lot of people. But in the north, there weren't that many people. So, that was one of the things that began to divide the country, was this idea of these districts. Solomon had numerous palaces. He had a lot of storehouses, and all of these things had to be supported by these districts for a month. And for some of these districts, it was impossible. And when they weren't able to support, then he constricted them to labor for them to work off what they owed him. So he adopted, in other words, what you would call it would be forced labor policies. And he made at first he started his forced labor policy with people outside his own people, like the Canaanites that were still recognizable as Canaanites. But then after a while, he made his own people do that. And so Israel begins to transform itself. The tribal identification by this time has been weakened considerably. The economy no longer is agrarian by nature. It's not for a while Israel was a growing country. Now it's a commercial nation. The religion has become much more centralized after the construction of the temple, but mainly because of Solomon, outside religion has had a greater impact on the nation Israel because, here comes the cavalry, see, here comes the horses, did you hear 'em? I knew Warren was just like Solomon. Because of all these wives he married, they all had his ear about religion. So the religious integrity of the nation was broken down by Solomon, even though he was a very wise man. But he wasn't wise about some things. So 1 Kings 11 will speak in regards to his downfall. So then, around 930 BC, the kingdom begins to split apart. The book of Kings, Chronicles, Amos, Hosea, when you look in those books, you can see that as the nation begins to shatter. And from 931 to 876, this schism begins to develop because of Solomon's oppressive policy. And the north begins to be alienated from the government in Israel. And in 1 Kings 12, you see the secession of northern Israel. What happens is that you have a political system set up in the north. You end up with a religious system set up in the north. So the empire begins to crumble because as the north pulls away from the south, Israel is no longer able to project its strength the way it once could. And so the kings of Judah begin with Rehoboam, okay? Rehoboam, okay? And there's a long succession of kings, and there are times of warfare, skirmishes between the north and the south. A lot of times the north wasn't strong enough to fight with the south, but every once in a while they would become strong enough to fight with the south, and Israel becomes weak enough where the Egyptians are able to come in and cause them trouble. And all this infighting causes a situation where eventually who comes in and takes over Judah? Yeah, well, the Assyrians take the north, then the south is taken by the Babylonians, yeah. And the internal affairs, Judah is smaller than Israel, but it's also poorer than Israel, and the policies that are put into place, a lot of what is attempted to be done in regards to running the country and stuff is done in Solomon's way, and it doesn't work. There's not enough people anymore. There's not enough wealth to support the lifestyles of the wealthy people. There's still a large court, still a large entourage. So we have these you end up with dynasties where you have families that rule. They might rule for 2 or 3 kings. And then you have some people in the north, like Omri comes to power. Omri is a general who comes to power. He's not even from one of the families, and he's able to come to power because of the instability in the country. And the Egyptians are coming in. So overall, what happens to Israel? Israel ends up being its own worst enemy. Okay? They become fat, dumb, and happy. And because of their lackadaisical attitude, because of the way they are incapable of working together to solve their problems, sound familiar? they fall prey to the people around them. So I'm going to stop there, and because I'm going to start teaching Ecclesiastes right there next week. And I think you'll see some of the sentiments in Ecclesiastes that I've tried to talk about today. But the deterioration within the country, it's militarily, it's religiously, it's culturally, everything falls apart. And really, it's because of the leadership. People need strong leadership. When they don't have strong leadership, it leads to all sorts of problems. So, that'll take us to next week. And next week we'll be in the Word and study Ecclesiastes. Any comments?
Did Solomon just get himself spread so thin with all his other Mickey Mouse that he was messing with, you know, horses, women, I mean, and that he really was not paying attention to?
He lived a very opulent lifestyle. Yeah. He came to a point when in his heyday, he could buy anything anywhere from anybody. But as he bought more, you know, he kept building palaces. His harem kept growing, you know. And when he married a woman, he married her family, he married everybody, and the bureaucracy, for lack of a better word, we might not think of it as a bureaucracy, became so large he couldn't support it anymore. So, and he just...
After a wise and discerning heart, and it's like, it just flip-flops. And when the riches and honor become more important to him, wise and discerning heart.
Well, because of his wisdom, his notoriety, he was known. That's why what's her name came to Sheba, Queen of Sheba, came to see him because he was known as the wisest man in the world. So he went to, you know, he had a regular sized peanut and then he got a big peanut because everybody kept telling him how wise he was. That's, you know, can't be too wise.
But not in his own household. I mean, he was wise as far as judging situations.
He's kind of like
David.
David. You know, David's greatest downfall was his inter-family relationships, you know, which he caused his own issues because he was in some ways a womanizer. You know, Solomon was a lot like David in that same